Hello makers, welcome back to 3D Maker Noob. I'm Joe, and today we're going to talk about the Emotiontech Microdelta Rework. Stick around. Welcome back makers. So it's finally time for me to give you my official review of the Emotiontech Microdelta Rework. I've had this printer for about a month now, and I've been printing to my heart's content. It's been printing night and day. These are just some of the prints that I have done with it. However, I'll get to these in a little bit. In the meantime, just a bit of an overview of the printer itself. It comes from a French company called Emotiontech, and this is the Microdelta Rework model. It is an upgraded version of their previously released U-Delta Rework and is a very solid printer. It comes in a kit. It gave me a bit of an issue putting it together because of the bushings, but I'll get to that in a little while. However, as a printer, it's actually very solid. It's mostly folded sheet metal. It has a build volume of 15 centimeters in diameter and 20 centimeters in height and costs about 400 euros. So it's not the cheap end of the scale. It's kind of like in the middle. However, there are very particular reasons for that, which I will get into. It does not come with a heat bed or an LCD screen. However, for the time being, since there is a delay of about 2 to 3 weeks until they ship out the units because of the demand of this printer, they are giving away the free graphic LCD screen with it. Now, all you'd have to do is dish out another 40 euros and you'd also get the heat bed. And I assure you, it would be worth the money that you spend on that. Now, I have to say that this is a very well built printer. Yes, I did have a couple of issues, actually just one issue putting it together, and that was the bushings. They just didn't have enough tolerance to glide freely on the linear rods of the printer. However, I did manage to sort that out. After I cut the live stream short because of that issue, I grabbed a few pieces of 1000 grit sandpaper. I just rolled them up inside the bushing and I sanded that down just to give me a bit more tolerance, and it worked perfectly. The printer itself is almost all sheet metal. It's folded sheet metal, which is a couple of millimeters thick, so it's very sturdy. Very few printed parts on the printer itself, other than the fact that we have the fan shroud and part of the effector, and also this part right here. Now this is the limit switch for the auto bed leveling. It's just a 3D printed part with a limit switch connected to it, a screw and a nut, and a wire which has a headphone jack. Now, in order to get the bed leveled, first what you need to do is open the version of Repetier Host that comes with the printer. It has a feature in it which you can find at the very last tab for auto leveling. Now, the first thing you need to do is grab the auto limit switch, well, let's call it apparatus. You unscrew the bolt and fit it inside the effector. Make sure it's very tight, and you insert the headphone jack into the socket on the side of the printer. You then just simply follow the instructions online. It couldn't be any easier. What it does is it will calibrate the leveling of the bed. It will do this for about a minute and a half or 2 minutes. Once that's done, all you have to do is remove the limit switch once again by simply unscrewing the nut that's on there, unplugging the headphone jack, and then continue with the process. The nozzle will go all the way down to the bed, and then you simply have to calibrate it in terms of the Z offset. And for that, all you do is just use the normal method of using a piece of paper under the nozzle and just keep pressing down until there is a slight bit of friction. What it does is then it calculates the rest of the bed based on that information, and you're good to go. Now the screen itself is actually a bit different than what we're used to with riprap printers. So it's a matter of adjusting to what commands mean. However, after about a couple of hours of tinkering with it, it was very easy to get a hold of it. Apart from that, the dial on this control board is actually one of the most responsive I have tried so far out of all the printers. It doesn't skip any menus. One click, one move, one press, one action. It's as simple as that. With other printers, you move the knob slightly and it kind of goes down 2 levels in the menu. This is actually spot on. Apart from that, what I really like about this printer is the fact that not only does it have an on and off switch, but it also has a very nice red reset button. So whenever something goes wrong, you're instantly within reach of stopping that print immediately. And that is something I would love to see coming out more from 3D printer manufacturers. Just a big red button just there to let you know that if something goes wrong, just press it and everything will be fine. The printer will stop. It could mean the difference between a failed print and a broken printer at the end of the day. So kudos to Emotiontech for actually handling that like an absolute boss. Now, having gotten that out of the way, it's time to talk about the printing quality itself. And boy, oh boy, this thing can print. And I mean, it can really print well. I think about 90% of the prints that I've printed, which I have here, are at 100 microns. For the simple fact that it's just spot on. As you probably know, I've taken on this initiative of printing as many scan the world objects I can actually find. And these are a lot of them. And the reason why there are a lot of them is because this printer handles details insanely well. It started off just by printing a benchy, as I always did. I kind of got the setting right for PLA, so I instantly went on to the Emotiontech thermosensitive PLA just to test it out. I kind of was a bit impressed for a first try for the benchy, and I printed the Colosseum. The details, the little points, everything, it's spot on, and I was completely amazed. I fell in love with this printer the second that this print came off of it. Once that was done, I started going a bit bigger. I printed this bust also from Scan the World, and while I was still dialing in the settings for the support for this printer, so it did not come as good as I possibly wanted to in terms of cleaning it up. The detail is there, and so I could see the potential, and I knew what I did wrong. And I kind of moved on from there. I printed mostly with PLA. I did mistakes. So for example, I printed this building of the Shard from UK. And while it isn't clean at all, actually, because the reason was I forgot to put retractions off on this, I still wanted to show it to you guys. I didn't have to, but I wanted to show you the detail, especially in the top part of how it handled very fine detail. And it's just spot on. I was completely impressed about the smoothness of each print I did. Most of you who follow me on Twitter see me posting these photos regularly. I can't help but be so proud for the fact that I bought this printer and I couldn't have wished for a better result than I already had. Now, I'm not going to go through all the details of these prints because it would just take too long. However, as you'll probably see, I am going through them on screen with the details of the filament and layer dimensions, but I want to point out 4 important factors from these prints. The first one is this. This is ABS. Now, I printed this not because I needed to print in ABS. This was just a test filament I got in MakerBox, and I wanted to see how the printer fared with high temperatures. It obviously printed very well, so I was quite happy. I then decided to print a bit of Polymaker Polyflex just to see how it goes, and once again printed incredibly well. This is a flowalistic model of the low poly Golf GTI, and it printed really well, so I was quite happy with that. I printed in a bit of PETG, or the equivalent of PETG. Now this was printed at 80 millimeters a second. I printed this during my live stream. This is a filament from Emotiontech. It's very similar to PETG. It has the same attributes, same printing elements, so I was quite happy that it turned out this good at that speed. However, I wanted to push this printer to the limit, and I was doing this up to yesterday evening because I wanted to see how far the printer can go before I put the review out. I wanted to print something that would showcase the pluses of a Delta printer, and that is the fast speed. So I wanted to print something at 100 millimeters a second. It took me quite a while. It took me about 2 days to do it, and the reason being is that I made a lot of mistakes, and it wasn't the printer itself. It was me not understanding what goes into printing at such high speeds. Now the first failure, let's call it, was this a half a body of Pikachu in PETG. It's MakerGeek's PETG. Now what happened was that it wasn't exactly a clogged nozzle. Granted, yes it was, but no it wasn't. The reason being is that the filament was not keeping up with the print itself. I tried to print this at 100 microns just to push a little bit further, but I didn't manage. So I said to myself, okay, let me try in normal PLA. So I grabbed some MakerGeek's green PLA, the Crystal series, and I tried it once more. Now, two things happened here, and that was my mistake once again. The first one is when you're printing any material at 100 millimeters a second, the amount of extrusion that happens very quickly is absolutely insane. So what happens is the filament, or the extruder, the nozzle, is not heating up filament fast enough. And here, two things happened. One, through my previous attempts of printing, the extruder got really dirty inside and I didn't realize, so it wasn't as effective as it was supposed to be. And I was still printing this at around, I think it was about 245. This has a recommended printed temperature of 230 for the Crystal series. In fact, you can see all the stringing I left there just for you guys to see. So I decided, okay, I'm gonna give it one last shot. I amped the temperature up to 260 degrees and I set a layer height of 0.2 millimeters. And we have a result. This came out so much better than I could have possibly imagined at 100 millimeters a second. Now just to make sure I printed this at 100 millimeters a second, I didn't even change the speed between the infill and the outside layers. Everything from start to finish except the first layer was at 100 millimeters a second. Now, two mistakes happened here. The first one is just on top of the eyes, and what happened there was the spool was kinked. So I kind of caught them just in time so to not make any more damage. And at the end, I was worried that too much heat is just going to ruin the ears. So I checked to see if I can lower the temperature a little bit, but I saw that it was making it worse. So I amped it up again. However, having said that, this thing turned out amazing. Absolutely amazing. This was printed 100 millimeters a second, guys. I love it. Now it's time for my final thoughts on this printer. And as always, I'm going to start with what I like about this printer. I love almost everything about this printer. It is solid, it is precise, it is fun, it is fast, it's compact, it's safe, it's everything you'd want a printer to be. The power supply is actually a brick. It's not one of those China-made power supplies. Everything is rigid. You can see everything is quality in here. They even supply you with rubber bands to tension the rods together. You have spare parts. And what I'm even more excited about this printer is the fact that they're coming out with a dual extruder for this printer. Now, when I put this together, I kind of figured out that they might end up doing this because on the board, which by the way is a 32-bit board, 24 volts, it has additional sockets which were not used for an additional extruder, for another heating element. So that was kind of a giveaway, but now that they've confirmed that it will come out later this year, I'm even more excited about this printer. Having said that, as I usually say, not every printer is perfect. However, there are three things. I've spent a long time trying to find things I don't like about this printer, and I came up with three things. One of them is the rubber bands they supply themselves are of very, very cheap quality. And two of them snapped after about 100 hours of printing. The second one was the bushings. That was a bit of a serious issue for me because someone who is not used to 3D printers might get very, very frustrated with that issue. And the third one was, as trivial as it may seem, on the instructions, it does not tell you the orientation of the bed or how to stick the build tack on the bed. So first time around, I stuck it sideways, and if you look at the printer from the front, the Microdelta Rework logo is just sideways, and that was bugging me. So what I ended up doing is removing it, ruining a build tack, and using the second one they had supplied with. Those were the three things that I came up with that I don't like about this printer. However, I spoke to them recently. I spoke to Emotiontech and I told them about these three problems. The bushings have already been revised. They have started doing new bushings with better tolerances because they figured it would be a problem. So that is fixed. The rubber bands, they fixed that a week ago. They found a new supplier and are shipping them with new rubber bands. The sticker, they're actually working on a new assembly manual, and they're going to include that. So I love this printer. I absolutely love this printer. I couldn't be happier to own it. I will be printing every single model I can on this printer from Scan the World. And once the dual extruder comes out, if it's as good as it is with a single extruder, oh, I'm gonna love this so much more. I don't know if it's possible, but I will. And that is it. I tried really hard to find something I don't like about this printer. And I wasn't paid to do this. I paid for 100 euros for this printer. And I am so happy that I did because it was worth every single penny. Yes, the size is slightly small, and maybe that's the one bad thing that I can find about this. Do it bigger, but make it as good. And that's it. I absolutely love this printer, and I don't want to end up saying I suggest you buy this printer or I recommend this printer. It's up to you. All I give you is my thoughts, but I love this printer, and even a person who's starting out in 3D printing, this is a really good choice to have. And that is it for today. Once again, another review done and dusted. I have to say that I've enjoyed every second with this printer, and I'm going to be doing so for a very long time. In the meantime, please let me know what you think in the comments. Please like, subscribe, share the video. If there's something I missed, please let me know so I can either reply to it in comments or include it in the next review I am going to be doing. And in the meantime, happy making, guys.